if I wanted to proceed, I had to solve whatever puzzle or beat whatever monster. And if it kept killing me, I'd have to figure out a new way to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Teaches
that
you
really,
persistence, especially in
yeah,
Zelda.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really affected, I would say it's my constitution in life of always moving forward, always looking for the next way to solve something, not just giving up.
Stay tuned for the show. Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
Hello, I'm Sarah Levesque, editor-in-chief of Logo Sophia magazine. I would like to invite you to explore our Pilgrim's Journal of Life, Love, and Literature, both in visual format and in podcast format. Our goal is to help bridge the gaps between different Christian denominations and traditions. Please visit our website at logosophiamag.com to read or listen to stories, articles, poetry, and more, all for free. We look forward to journeying with you.
Hi, I'm Joshua David Ling, and I'm resurrecting epic poetry for nerds like you. Come join me at joshuadavidling.com or just about anywhere on social media.
Welcome back. We are here in trenches with Virginia Patrick, incredible artist and storyteller. Speaking about, well, all the things we normally do on Poets at War and in the Brood. It's good to be back in the trenches with you. This is Poets at War.
God of song, said warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall praise thee.
It's funny because just maybe a couple years ago, I would not have even thought of, getting a membership for Planet Fitness or whatever. And it's it's really been like a change in me that had to happen. Like no one else told me to do it. I was just like, you know what? I should get a membership. I
Right.
should start going to church. And it's changed my energy levels, and now I'm like starting to build a Christian community around myself again. So it's been good. It's been a start of a new journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. There's a lot of stuff like that going on with everyone trying to rebuild from the past couple of years. I have, this less so, but just fitness wise, this is what I've been doing just because I don't have money for a gym membership. Hold on. Reach over here. I have a 4-pound sledge. I've been tossing end over end and catching in various ways, shapes and forms,
Okay.
with squats and other sorts of things. And
Mhm.
honestly, my I gained a lot of weight when I started doing a job several years ago, and it really messed up my circulation to where I ended up having all kinds of issues in my legs and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a driving job. I know you do a driving job, but it's a little different. It was a non-emergency medical transport, and
Okay. Yeah, people don't know how much damage actually
Mhm.
driving can do. It's very stressful on the body. People
Yeah.
are like, you just sit on your rear and don't do it.
Yeah,
No,
no.
no. There's also
It's
some
worse than
injuries
an
that can
office.
happen in the driver leg. So your
Mhm.
right leg and your right you can get plantar fasciitis, a lot of different strains in the muscles there.
Mhm.
Uh, whenever there's a new driver, I always recommend for them to, stretch their legs, especially in between your shifts. And it can cause a lot of stress on the back. Like I noticed I was having all this back pain. I'm like, I'm in my 20s. Why am I
Mhm.
crackling like I'm 75? I was
Yeah.
like, what? And so what's actually helping is this working out. And once, I've done workouts for the lower back,
Mhm.
that pain has really, really subsided. And it's even more comfortable to sit in my driver's seat. And even when I wake up in the morning, I don't have this like nagging pain in the small of my back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I like this now.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I invested in a standing desk. I didn't do one of the, super expensive ones, but I got a crank one, and I found a top. I worked for it's actually the apartment complex we lived in for a while, and I worked as maintenance, and they were throwing out these breakfast nooks that are actually like a 5-foot table, kind of a thing,
Yeah, yeah.
tabletop. And I was able to snag one of these tabletops a while ago and just kind of held on to it for a while. And because I knew I was just going to eventually one day get myself legs so that I could put them on, and now I have a crank table up and down, nice 5 foot 5 foot long desk. So, but yeah, the what was I gonna say? The not only the sitting, but just like I had football and wrestling injuries that were plaguing me for a while. And let me fix this. Why does this thing shut down like this? I'm still trying to figure this out. I had to change from. Okay, so I have a teleprompter. And this is boring minutia, but why not? Let's do it. My teleprompter, I have an iPad on it currently. I had an Android phone as like the screen for it a little while ago, and what's it called? Duet, the company that makes the thing that I use for the teleprompter to connect my, computer and the Mac and whatever else so that I can see what's going on my Mac on the teleprompter. It basically just like it times out and shuts down. And so I'm trying to figure that out. But anyway, so yeah, you are a writer person from the Brood.
Yes, I am.
A lot of people
We've changed it to Das Bruden Duden
at the moment. Yeah.
That one, it was that Ocarina of Time meme where like the German version was Das Fluten Duden, and I was like, I changed my username to that, and every time I save that to my phone, and every time I look at it, I can't stop laughing.
Yep, it's hilarious. And yeah, apparently the German translation of Ocarina of Time is Das Fluten Duden. But the I know we just cracked up about that in the Brood. And
Yeah. Good.
I like nicknaming it, changing the snake. Just the nicknames. It's all part of the culture of the Brood, like just the goofy stuff that we do. But the you've written a good bit. You're a good artist. I'd love to put some of your art up if you'll send it to me. I'll probably do it right now-ish for people who are watching this later. But tell me, like, what were your inspirations? Basically, what kind of nerd are you? Where are you coming from?
I am a like Zelda nerd. So I have I grew up on the Zelda series. I absolutely loved it. What's strange is a lot of people who get into writing, they've gotten into writing through reading. And I actually hated reading growing up.
Yeah,
I
me too,
absolutely hated it. I could feel my bones grinding together when I had to sit down and read a book. But I loved playing my Zelda game, my N64, Ocarina of Time, Das Fluten Duten. And it opened up a whole world of fantasy and like all these characters. And what I like about the Zelda series is there's a bit of mystery to it, so it doesn't happen as much as an adult. I think that's because the childhood wonder is gone, But I would just hang out in places in the game like the graveyards or certain parts of Hyrule Field or the Forest Temple. I found it so, there was something very inspiring, very mesmerizing about it. And I'm able to go back if I do play it again. I'll go back and I'll go in those places, and it's kind of like nostalgia. I don't get that same connection I had when I was younger, but it's like it sparked all of these ideas for me.
Right.
And out from there, I started with doing like really weird Zelda fanfic stories. And I look back on that and I'm like, just burn it. Just burn it. Do not look back. I will go and live as a goat in the countryside if anyone ever finds this.
I think looking back at your fan fiction is almost looking at like pictures of yourself with teeth missing as a 9 and 10-year-old, something like that. You're just oh my goodness.
So that actually got me into writing fantasy, and I think also video games, it's always a debate. Some parents are like, oh, you're not doing anything productive, you're not doing this, I don't want you on the game all day.
I'm not that camp.
What it did for me was it taught me how to problem solve.
Exactly.
And if I wanted to proceed, I had to solve whatever puzzle or beat whatever monster. And if it kept killing me, I'd have to figure out a new way to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Teaches
that
you
really,
persistence, especially
yeah,
Zelda.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really affected, I would say it's my constitution in life of always moving forward, always looking for the next way to solve something, not just giving up.
Right.
And that really helped with my life, even in the past couple of years. I'm able to trace that, solving problems when something comes up. I'm just looking for the next right thing to do. What can I do? What can I change?
Right.
And I part of it I credit it to playing video games as a kid.
Yeah, definitely. I
Mhm.
I came from a family where all forms of media were very much considered to be worthwhile,
Mhm.
as so long as they were, not changing your attitude and taking you over in bad ways, which all kids have to
Yeah.
deal with that. But the thing that really got me into writing and reading, and I'm reiterating for a lot of people who are listening, but for you, because we've talked some, but it was
Mhm.
Narnia and Tolkien, but it wasn't me reading them, it was my father reading me Narnia and then taking me
Mhm.
to the Lord of the Rings in 2001, because he actually had a hard time reading, The Hobbit, etc. So he took me to Lord of the Rings in 2001 because he had started reading The Hobbit around the same time as Lord of the Rings. He's coming out of progressive rock 70s, sort of
Mhm.
culture and everything. He loved music, and he did and he realized when he was converted why he loved music was
Mhm.
because it's a gift from God.
Mhm.
I think there was a Martin Luther quote that got put on a cross stitch that's in our in the house of my mom and everything. He's passed away, but she's still here. It says, music is a fair and glorious gift from God. Martin
Mhm.
Luther, and he saw that, and as a Jesus music, kind of hippie kid in the 70s kind of thing,
Yes.
totally well, he was rebelling, and then he found God, and then he realized, like, all the beauty and goodness was a gift all along.
Mhm.
And he gave that to us, in that, like, whatever the medium was, certain, yeah, sure, there are certain things that you got to use wisdom on, for sure, especially depending on
Oh.
the kid's age. But,
Mhm.
like, everything was really important. He turned the blood off and played Mortal Kombat with us on Super
Mhm.
NES. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it was really fun, and that was something really exciting that he could do with those boys, and enjoy the masculinity and the fighting and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
and I played a lot of games growing up, but the funny thing is, being the eldest of five, who's the bad guy whenever it's someone else's turn to play video games?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
always the oldest kid, right? And so after a while, after N64 and partway through, GameCube's run, I kind of just tapered off.
Mhm.
And I haven't played a lot since then. I still play. There's a few games after that, like Skyrim, that I really
Oh yeah.
enjoy, because I really enjoyed Morrowind. I didn't really play Oblivion, but yeah, it's one of those things where people ask if I'm a gamer. I'm like, yeah, casually. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a picky gamer, is what it
Yeah,
is.
I am
Yeah.
too. I am too. I really only have pretty much stayed Nintendo my whole life. Recent video games that I have really loved are the Little Nightmares series. Oh,
Hmm.
just the atmosphere and the art.
Hmm.
And that was what really influenced my current work.
Hmm.
The Caravan, that's the working title I have for it. I might change it in the future.
Yeah.
I'm considering the Caravan or the Caravan of the Invisibles.
Right.
So
Go
either
ahead. Tell
one,
us about
I
that.
might change it again. Who knows?
Yeah.
Uh,
Tell us more about that.
I'm terrible with titling. I can title my chapters. I cannot title my books or my
Right.
series.
Right, right, yeah. Well, tell us more about that, because that's a really good pivot point, and I want to definitely give you some spotlight for what you're doing. I know it's more in progress, but
Hmm.
people who listen to this, like, I want them to be looking out for folks so that it's easier for them to build an audience when the time comes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and honestly, build an audience as you go. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't
Hmm.
don't sit
Yeah.
there and think you have to make everything perfect before you get going.
Definitely, definitely. That's actually what started with the art for it. I
Hmm.
was like, oh, I want to get more. I want to get the style down. I want to get the style down. I want like,
Mhm.
and I was like, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. But then I just said, just draw the first page. If you don't like
Mhm.
it, you can do it again.
Right, exactly.
And from there, it was like the style emerged on the page when it came to the art. I work primarily pen and ink for this one.
Mhm.
I use I think it's the Faber-Castell India ink set.
Mhm.
I love India ink. It is there and it is like pitch dark
Yeah.
and it will not be disturbed by anything. Probably
See, I
aside
wish
from
I was into all this, but I'm not. I
you
don't have a good
pour
enough
it on
hand
it.
for it.
It's a alcohol soluble ink.
Yeah.
So it's not water soluble. It's great for watercolor artists. I used to do watercolor in the past, but I've
Yeah.
kind of set the paints aside.
Mhm.
Just because the inks are easier. You can just, just start painting, close it up, be done, come back,
Mhm.
It works with my job and my lifestyle right now. And what happened was there's this disconnect as I'm creating
Mhm.
where there's what I have in my head, what I want to come out on the page, and it never comes out how I want it.
Right.
Because I will see a panel from maybe a severe top-down angle, or like
Mhm.
the camera all the way almost down to the floor looking up.
Mhm.
And I'll try to draw that on my little sketch page, and sometimes it just won't come together.
Right.
And so I have to settle on this kind of in-between angle.
Mhm.
And I have to then work with what comes out on the page, and it's very different from what I had in mind. I
Right.
mean, I'm telling the same story, but I have to give up, what
Mhm.
my expectation was, and then meet myself on the page. And I feel like
Right.
this is where a lot of artists and authors too will give up
Mhm.
because it's not what they envisioned. And oftentimes that's never what comes out on the page. So
And
my job is to then respond to the information that comes out on the page itself.
yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that drew me to poetry, the epic poetry that I do, um, is the give and take and the back and forth, but also, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know when I started writing prose.
Mhm.
And you don't. That's the thing. Like you kind of have to just vomit everything out with prose
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
come back around, right? Whereas with poetry, each rhyme, each line, each meter, like I could feel if it was working or not, right?
Yes.
And so it was still this iterative like back and forth with myself, and it still is, but because I get consistent feedback from the art itself, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I can hear a rhyme like oh, what's something that sticks out to me right now. There's a with the end of my first season arc of Guardians of Atlanta, which is superhero kind of thing. There was just this one section that came to me as I was writing, and it was do not fear the blood of the ancients, they only posture and jest. For as long as Christ is the Lord of your life, his heart beats in your chest.
Mm.
And like that's the thing. Boom, it hits you like
Mhm.
and it's like comfort food. It sticks to your bones, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
You go yes, there's this
Mm.
visceral thing with poetry where you're like it's like eating a big plate of mac and cheese, from some southern grandma, you know what I mean? And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, comfort, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? And so that's one of those things that really gets me. And that goes back to music with my father. He was a mobile DJ and taught me in that business and raised me up through that. And because of that, we really love music. He was music as much as I am stories. And so
Yeah, yeah.
poetry, song lyric was something that we talked about often. That
Mhm.
that was a big thing. And I learned a lot of poetry through song lyrics, through things like your obvious stuff like Dr. Seuss, but also my mom read to me a lot of poetry from various collections she had and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I went back and I thought about Narnia, and I'm like, I'm trying to get this big lofty, not Lord of the Rings. So many people go after Lord of the Rings. That's impossible, quite frankly. Like, no one's
Mhm.
touched Tolkien. I don't know if anyone will. It's fine if they don't. It's one of those
Mhm.
things.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
but I felt like I could hit Lewis eventually. You know what I mean? And I think I still technically could. I think I'm that good. That's maybe, whatever as far as Narnia. But Narnia was him just like he put a lot of thought into it. Don't get me wrong, a lot more than what people give him credit for. But he was also very loose with it, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so and fun. And I knew that I could do that if I really hunkered down. But then I thought about it more and more and more, and like I said, the prose thing, it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I wanted, and my dyslexia wasn't letting me get through to it. And then I thought, what if I just do this one story as a hip hop album? And that's how it started with the poetry,
Mhm.
right? And I realized my love for epic poetry, and it started to morph back into a more traditional realm,
Mm.
but still with that weird hip hop rock and roll, let's go kind of edge to it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that was kind of my inspiration. And I see a similar vein with you. You kind of let a lot of the, you know, pressures of perfection just drop. I
Mhm.
see that in
Yeah.
your art. I see it in what you're doing, but it's like but it's your soul that it's still your soul that's being bared and
Mhm.
poured out. And I love that, man. That's just even the limited amount of stuff I've seen from you. I've really enjoyed that.
Well,
So,
thank you.
mhm.
But yeah, definitely with the poetry, I think what you're sensing is, and what's drawing you to it is poetry is bounded by rules, it's
Mhm.
bounded by order. So
Mhm.
you know when you're hitting the mark,
Yep.
and you also know very much when you're missing the mark.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I feel like a lot of modern storytelling is losing its foundations.
Mhm.
Because traditionally we have like the 3 act. If you want to go more opera, you have the 5 act structure.
Or you can go
Uh,
to Joseph Campbell with the hero's journey, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
But these are stories that they have a purpose in the way they're told. They're bounded by order. And what's happening with a lot of media, especially movies that are coming out recently, is they are not bounded by the same sort of traditional rules of
Right.
storytelling, and it shows in the
Oh
writing.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Audiences don't connect. All it
Mhm.
is there was a lot of movies I went with my mom over the summer and we saw, and it was just like going on a theme park ride.
Yes.
There wasn't any sustenance.
Mhm.
And I think one of the best movies I saw, it was Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. It's about this old lady who she wants to get a Dior dress.
Mhm.
And I went into that and I was like, this is just going to be a movie for my mom because I know she likes light, fluffy things like this. And that movie hit home so hard for me
Mhm.
because it followed all the arcs it was supposed to. It delivered on its promises.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new media coming out that's not doing it. It is very cardboard and one-dimensional.
Mhm.
And I mean, I hope, and I know you hope as well, to break that trend.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that we're breaking the trend. The fact is that and this was Tolkien's thing, and he honestly, felt like it was so long gone. He's a big pessimist about a lot of this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But the fact is, like, I'm fully confident because Scripture has been such a backbone of the world's storytelling,
Yes, yes.
especially since Christ's resurrection.
Mhm.
But even before that, to a certain extent, like, people heard of the tales of the Jews and all these other sorts of things all over the
Mhm.
world because they hit home. Because
Yes.
God is the best author, period.
Mhm.
And we're just copying him in whatever form we take, in whatever little kind of steps we make toward any kind of structure, right? Chiasm
Yes.
or Joseph Campbell or whatever it is. It's all imitating Jesus, right?
Mhm.
Peter, you want to say good night? Come here, buddy. Can I say what? He changed it again.
Found it.
Oh, he found it. That's right. Where'd he find it?
I don't know.
You don't
He
know?
just came out of his, that one in his mouth, and this was like.
Say
"Here
hi,
you go,
Miss
Mama."
Virginia. What do you go by that, by the way? What do you go by?
I go by Virginia.
Okay, I like that. I like that
Yeah.
you go by that because I go by Joshua. So many people are Josh, and I'm like, Josh wasn't an ancient warrior in the Old Testament. He's a boy band member in the 90s. Yeah. I got you. Okay. All right, buddy. Go out with mama, okay? I love you, sweet boy. Glad you found it. He found a pacifier that he had been missing for quite some time that he was really excited
finally.
about. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I work with kids for my job. I'm a school bus driver.
Mm-hmm.
I also got, over the summer, I got my tanker and hazmat endorsements. So I'm endorsed to drive fuels, explosives, radioactive things.
Lovely.
All sorts of good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But I stuck with the busing, and
Mm-hmm.
that was what really influenced the comic I'm writing.
Yeah.
Is it was my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I would have never come up with this idea had I not gone out and gotten a job in the trades.
Right.
Because I remember in college, I graduated from Roberts Wesleyan. They were always like, oh, write from your experience, draw from your experience, do art from your perspective. But with a lot of the college age artists, their only perspective is being an artist.
Yeah.
So you get this very avant-garde sort of like inside joke of an inside joke of an inside joke that your common layman can't connect with at all.
Right.
And then
Right.
going into the trades, getting my CDL, I came up with a whole new idea. I was playing Little Nightmares, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, wait, because I'm very small. Like, not as small as 6 in Little Nightmares, but I'm 4'11". I am short, and
Right.
I started
Shorter than my
to
wife. That's amazing.
Oh,
She's 5'1", so yeah.
It's hard to find anyone who's shorter than I am.
Right.
I think
It's hard to find anyone shorter than my wife.
in my whole life that were maybe 1 inch shorter than me, and that was a feat of nature. But I was playing Little Nightmares, and I was starting to see these school buses kind of like the Maw in the Little Nightmares, how everything was just so big, and I thought, you know what? Giant buses. Let's write a story about giant buses. And there was a giant robot. And I was like, we're going to have giant buses having a battle with a giant robot. And I remember Brandon Sanderson, I was watching his writing advice videos from YouTube, and he said something like, make it awesome first, then make it make sense.
Yeah, there is that. My experience totally colors and Easter eggs through everything I do, but one of the most prime examples, the hip hop album that I mentioned, is the first story in the Guardians of Atlanta series, the superhero situation. I had this crazy idea of, and I had it for a while, of one of the characters being a cowgirl with storm powers. And initially that was a joke to kind of be like, she helps water the crops and whatever else. And then I was going to do like the idea of a spaceship coming down and her comedically fighting off, the aliens, whatever, in the middle of nowhere, blah, blah, blah. And I think she was Kansas and blah, blah, blah. One day, and this was the same day that I said I need to do a hip hop album. I need to write this and I need to do it this way. Because she was the character I hadn't fully broken yet. Like, I hadn't really fleshed her out. I was walking home from Publix where I worked, which is a grocery store for anyone who doesn't know. And it was about 5 miles. I didn't normally walk it, but no one could pick me up in a decent amount of time. So why not walk 5 miles home? You know what I mean? It's not that bad. So I was walking home, and I am not one for public planning. I think that's stupid, but I do think as someone who creates a piece of land or works a plot of land or landscapes a plot of land, you shouldn't be changing the grass every single plot.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's just that's just unkind to your neighbor. It's unkind to the community. And I was seeing that change, like literally every plot of land, and none of them were the same wide-bladed, green, beautiful stuff that existed in my front yard that was native, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was feeling so upset about that. in 1996, the Olympics came to Atlanta. This is in Alpharetta. Alpharetta was named the #1 relocation city in all the USA when I was 6 years old in 1996. And everything just blew up. And it was not that I'm not one who goes to the extreme edge of like your Wendell Berry, kind of thing. I think we need to build societies. We need to build cities. We need to make them beautiful. Right.
Yes.
But also like, try to hold in as much of what is there in the first place that makes that place beautiful to begin with, and not forsake it, not forget it. And that sparked this idea that this girl's coming home from college and she's seeing all this change, even just since she'd been away, all this construction, all this mayhem, all this just ridiculousness. And then she finds out that they got someone pressing to sell their farm. And that just sets everything in motion for me.
That's a good inciting incident.
Yeah, absolutely. So that just really set everything in motion for me. And that's writing what you know, but it doesn't have to be mundane. That's the thing. I think people, they feel like, oh, I'm mundane, that's why I'm writing. And it's like, no, you're not mundane because you're writing. If you're being a writer is not a mundane thing, first of all. Second of all, the way you actually find what that thing is I'll tell you another experience real quick, and I'd love to hear more of yours if you have them. But the DJ business, one of the most, and this is just kind of colors the way I look at beauty. It's not a specific to a story, but one of the big experiences that I think goes throughout all my work, this sort of rock and roll, heart and soul kind of thing, right? When we did DJing, we did a lot of kids parties, and we would dance out in front of a crowd, and they'd follow along, and we'd give out, inflatable guitars and microphones and little prizes and things to people who were dancing along. They were following well, and they were giving it their all. Those were the main things. It's like you could be technically good, but that's not all what we're looking for. We want you to be having fun, right?
Yeah.
And like one of the songs that we did that was just magical every time. It's a song called "Move It Like This" by the Baha Men. Can you move it like this? I can shake it like that. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
But yeah, basically we would do call and response. Can you move it like this? And they'd say, I can shake it like that. And we would get, some of the biggest ones we ever did were thousands of kids at a festival, just screaming at the top of their lungs this call and response. And the song, which is the last song of the thing, they know the grand prize, the giant inflatable microphone is coming, and they're giving it their absolute all as just one giant group. And as they're singing this chorus, the song fades out, and all you can hear is the people who gathered together as one and enjoyed this moment and gave it everything their little heart had. Right? Like, it's just like you can't help but like just the volume of the whole thing, the big grand, the rising and the finale of the whole thing. And then like, it's just us. Take away the speakers, take away the microphones and the inflatable prizes. We did something here.
Yeah.
Like there was something spiritual that happened here. And it was at a little kid's birthday party. Like that, how rock and roll is that, right? Like people think, you have to have your spiritual experiences in a cathedral. People think you have to have your spiritual experiences, at funerals, at this, at that, whatever, this dark night of the soul. No, my best and most amazing experiences were with strangers. Singing a song as loudly as we could to win an inflatable piece of plastic. How insane is that? Like, for real, And so that's why I think fairy tales work. And that's why I think something as ridiculous as The Princess and the Pea has an emotional resonance to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there as one of my favorite little anecdotes. But yeah, go ahead. You go ahead with so anything you have after that.
I wanted to tell you a little bit about the comic too, not just the creation process.
Yes, please.
So the premise, kind of a roundabout way of saying the premise. I never quite got like the conciseness that premises have.
That's okay. You'll get there.
Yeah, yeah. So our main character, her name is Judith Sorrelwood,
Okay.
and she joins the Caravan. They're a bus company. So she joins them to pay off a debt she has to these people called the Collectors. And they are a company that if you owe them money, they will collect you as
I
payment
love it.
for your
Love it.
debt.
Reminds me of Repo the Genetic Opera. Yep.
And so she's not only earning money with the Caravan, but she is also getting away from the Collectors. And when they're after you, they dispatch these giant robots that have like tanks in them for like storing people. So they just go around and casually like collect debtors and lock them away in these tanks, and then they bring them back to their base.
Are they
and of course,
cryogenically in these tanks frozen or
Huh?
something? Or are they cryogenically frozen in these tanks or something? Or is it just like
They're kind
containment?
of like in suspended animation a
Okay.
little bit. So
Gotcha.
this is more of like anime has so much of these. You see them,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like giant test tubes.
Yeah.
It's almost in every anime will have something in
Yeah.
in that sort of style.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like Sonic X, the Ancient Magus Bride,
Yep.
The Promised Neverland. Even it has that look to it. So this robot has all these tanks, and it's after Judith to store her.
There's
in
a
there.
lot of shorthand that I miss from anime and stuff like that. So I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page. See, I get that from more like Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls.
Oh yeah. It's
You know?
But it has that
They stole
look.
from
So
anime. Yeah.
they have entire warehouses of debtors stored.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a little bit like Victorian debtor's prison, but a little modern take on it. And they can sell you in any way they want to pay your debt off. So I'm yet to pursue how dark that goes. Are they in the organ harvesting
So you gotta
business?
wait for the dark episode. That's what you got.
Yes,
one
so
episode everyone's gonna remember and shiver.
Yes. And in the end, Judith, she does get captured. I know that this is going to happen. She does get captured, and they want to take her eyes as payment. So I'm taking sort of like the Coraline route there. And as
That's a weird thought. I've thought, I was thinking of Repo the Genetic Opera. I was thinking of that, Coraline. Like, why is that a thing? I need to do some deeper. This is a side, but I need to do some deeper dive into why, like, when they're coming to take something away, it's almost always your heart or your eyes.
Yes, and this
That's
goes
really
back
strange.
into like ancient stories. Like, I listen to Jordan Peterson a lot. He's one of my absolute favorite speakers, and I know I'm not gonna get this story 100% right, but I'm going off of what he said. It was the Egyptian myth of Osiris and Set.
Oh, okay.
And I forget who exactly the characters are, but there's like the king of Egypt, and he's willfully blind to his brother Set, who is kind of like a satanic figure. And Set has this plot against him, and he attacks him and cuts him into pieces and spreads him throughout the land. That was the kind of symbolic nature of the state splitting apart into different provinces. And his son, the murdered king's son, he ends up going into like the underworld to piece his father back together. But in confronting this evil uncle figure, he loses an eye doing so. And the same thing with that movie, Kubo and the Two Strings.
I love that movie.
Kubo, he already has an eye taken by his grandfather, and his grandfather wants to take his eyes as a sort of enlightenment to give him like true sight and turn him into a deified being. So he wants the eye as well, and it's there's a huge connection. There's a spiritual connection with sight and seeing, and it can have all these different metaphors to it. And it's one of those. It has like an archetypal value at this point. There's something different you can see in a story like that over and over again.
Yeah, it seems much more Eastern than I would have thought. But like, yeah, because I've done that in a story before. I've done something similar with that. There's a character who's essentially I won't spoil everything for everybody, but there's a character who's essentially a Frankensteining of various bloodlines into one person, and someone recognizes the eyes of a former friend in them.
Ooh, oh, that
Yeah.
is creepy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I
I
know you
love
from
it though.
somewhere,
I
right? Yeah, yeah,
absolutely love it.
yeah.
Wow.
So that's in Guardians of Atlanta as well. But see, like I said, see, I did it without even like thinking about that, like thinking of those implications, because I guess, yeah, it would make sense that, especially in Eastern thought, when you're thinking of enlightenment, that sort of an idea, the spiritual enlightenment, you know, and we say window to the soul kind of thing in the West, but like it's weird. I think we place much less of an emphasis on the West in sight. Yeah, that is weird. I'm gonna have to do some research into that, because it feels like, to me, like initially I would have thought this is something like I could dive into Celtic lore with, but I don't think there's much there as compared to the East.
I know there will be, but I don't know if it's as mainstream stories.
Or that they even have the same idea, because I'm thinking like Odin has one eye, but it's an all-seeing eye. You know, whatever, as far as the story goes, there's a lot of weird stuff there, man. I gotta look into that. But yeah, yeah, I'm excited about your series though. The idea of the caravan is something I really like in general. I like this idea of institutions, whether they are in the private realm or not. Sometimes they're more interesting when they're in the private realm. And they've just become such an institution. It's like Band-Aid. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like people don't say bandages, they say Band-Aid. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Things like that just really are really funny to me. That's more of a thing in the South too, where people will say Coke, but they mean like a soda. You know what I mean? That's becoming less of a thing as culture homogenizes, but literally all we had was Coke until like I think the 50s or something. You know what I mean? Like in the South. So that's what it was, a Coke. What kind of Coke you want? People like, what?
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about when you talk about the caravan, that's immediately kind of what I get, is this like institution. This is the bus people. These, you know,
Yes.
it's almost like Bluebird plus BNL from Wall-E. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what's funny is in the caravan there is a sort of rival company called Exodus.
Okay.
And it's funny because I'm a company driver. I'm basically leased out to different districts as needed for relief.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny because company drivers, we have our rivals. And you know, it is very funny seeing how you know, you're driving down the street and you see, it's like you see if they wave or not. If they wave back, they're peaceable. If they just glare at you, you're like, all right, I'm taking off one of your mirrors next time I see you. There's this, it's just this inbred animosity between the companies. I mean, not that I endorse taking off mirrors, but in the caravan universe, maybe they do that.
Right,
So,
exactly.
I mean, after all, there's a giant robot just collecting people. So
yeah, that's
and
amazing.
with these buses, they are gigantic. I designed them with Cat 787 mining vehicles in mind. And I combined the Cat 787 diesel trains and just school buses, basic school bus / tour bus. Because these aren't quite school buses, they're more just passenger transport. They're triple deckers. Their wheels are as tall as a school bus, and they take up 2.5 lanes. So we do need a universe where the roads are wide enough for this.
Yeah. That is cool.
What's interesting though is as I write it, the theme developed. I didn't have a theme in mind, and it was funny because I would read books on writing, the craft of writing, and so many of them like, you need to know your theme right off the bat, and I don't know what my theme is when I go into something. If I know my theme, it becomes instant propaganda for me as I'm writing it. I can know certain ideas I want to bring up, but I never know the theme until I'm like in the thick of it. And what I realize with the caravan and all these characters, they're very, very different characters that come together. And that's what we experience in transportation. We're like a pirate crew. We really are. you have all different backgrounds, truckers, police officers, bankers, people who CEOs even, and you have people that they come from all over,
That
and
was the
they get
same thing in non-emergency. Yeah.
yeah.
We had one of the craziest experiences I ever had was a guy who was way overqualified for the job, just wanted a little extra change and didn't know how long he was going to be staying. He was he did full on paramedic work, and he was from the Army. But he had never heard and you may or may not be familiar with this given your background, but he had never heard the transcendental argument for God and apologetics. Basically the idea that how can you say that 2 + 2 = 4 every time? How can you be absolutely sure in a completely chaotic, ridiculous universe, basically, right? Like he had never really heard that argument that God actually fills that role and that there's a moral standard outside of just whatever I think, right?
Yes.
Or what the collective thinks. Because that's the two what people go to. We go to a collective, whether or we, well, three really. We go to a collective, we go to ourselves, or we go to the tyrant, right? and sometimes the collective can be the tyrant. But it's interesting the kind of people you meet in those situations. I'm excited to hear more about that, especially as we go. Be sure to be posting it in the Brood and
yeah. I'm a little like, I don't want to be that one artist that's always posting their art.
Right.
Like,
I kind of do because it's my group, but even I hold back sometimes just because I want people to be able to post memes and do crazy stuff in there.
Oh, yes, and I love the memes. It was funny, you were talking about like the objective morality versus like, one truth. There was a meme I was sharing around, and it's Nutella on spaghetti, and it says, without objective morality, everything is permissible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've seen some of those. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and with writing this, these characters, these themes, I realized that everyone who comes to the caravan, they have a background, and often they're running from something. And that's what one character, this cook, Reggie Owens, he comes up and he says in passing, only the only people who join the caravan are those who are running from something. And
there's your theme.
Yeah, and all these characters, they have something from their past they got away from, and somehow in being on the caravan, they're confronted with it. And then there's a theme of where they break off and they return reformed to what they left behind.
Yeah. That's crazy. I like that. Yeah, with theme, it's one of those things that I find I listen to a lot of music in preparation, and not even preparation, in the creation of characters. I do a lot of playlists and things for characters. I also do once I have a basic idea of who they are, I also do I don't think it's as helpful for an actual person, but it's extremely helpful for me in understanding character motivations to do the Enneagram as the character. As I do Myers-Briggs as well. Myers-Briggs is good for that too, but I think Enneagram's better because there is a musical artist, and like I said, you can tell music is a huge part of what I do. I do the Enneagram, and there's an artist called Sleeping at Last. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's sort of an Owl City sort of guy, has his own little name or whatever, but does his own singer-songwriter thing. He's excellent. I've not heard a song from him that I don't like, but he did an album specifically from the point of view of each of the 9 Enneagram situations. And I listened to mine one time just because I was curious. I don't sit here and put myself in the box of Enneagram. My identity's in Christ. I don't think there's things in it that are interesting, but they're the same thing as any of these archetypes and mythologies that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I looked at 7, which is mine, and it says basically, I'm restless for whatever comes next. And it's this song where that's very hopeful and exciting and optimistic, and then the bridge is this kind of part where he breaks down into, it's like he's speaking to his love, his wife, whatever, and he says, I want this, I want to keep going, I want to keep pushing forward, but I also want to learn to stop and love you in the moments in between that aren't, great grand adventures. And that's the hard part that that I struggle with, right? And that the first time I heard that song, it wrecked me, and I'm like, goodness gracious, what is it going to be like when I actually like put myself in the acting shoes, because that's part of storytelling, acting, of Cirrus Jones, the woman who the young woman I spoke of with the storm powers, and everything, and hers is sort of like this tough, rigid, protective, I don't want anything to change sort of personality, right? And how that song broke me just looking at it from her perspective, right? And everything she'd been through. And so when I get to theme, it's usually because I've really broken the character. I know who they are.
Yeah.
And I know what has to happen to them to break them and reform them into something stronger, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what's happening with me too in my story. I'm realizing like there were some characters that I was like, well, where are you coming from? Like, what are you here for? Because I knew that there were going to be some like relationships with the coworkers. Not really romantic relationships. There are some though.
Yeah. Well, why not?
Yeah. I knew, I'm like, okay, I need these two to be friends, or I need these two to be not friends and then they become friends, or I need these two to be friends and then grow apart from each other. And I'm like, well, how do we get there? And that's what I figure out actually along the way. I mean, what I do is I have my whole script, and my issues generally run longer. So the first issue is around like 34 pages. Where normally I think comics generally are like 18 to around like 28 generally, but I trimmed the fat as much as I could on this, and I just felt like it needed those extra couple pages to really drive it home. And now with, printing nowadays, it really doesn't matter. I think as long as you stay under, usually the cutoff is around 60 pages for an issue, then they consider it graphic novel.
Right.
And I treat each issue like a chapter, so each chapter in a larger volume. And in the art has really informed the characters themselves too. Yeah. And what was interesting was I had done some comic work for some clients before, and that kind of like primed the pump in a way. You could consider it that. And what I did was I was like, this is a really cool story about giant buses in sort of a post-apocalyptic world where, their whole structure was broken down. I was also inspired by, what we went through with the pandemic. But I zeroed in on the depression and the isolation and the paranoia that happened because of that. And I took a Last of Us route, and I said, well, it's not a virus, but it's a fungal infection. And then, so there's these aerosolized spores that pop up in cities, and they call it the haze. And they need these giant buses to evacuate cities. So that there's a hazmat crew, the hazers, they call them. They come through, spray the antifungals, and they wait for a season cycle to go through, and it kills off the spores. And with these characters, I'm beginning to see their past with this sort of outbreak, and also, so a lot of my life goes into the work.
Yeah.
And what was funny is as I drew Judith more, she kind of looked a little bit like, she was like a toss-up between Six from Little Nightmares, Midna from Twilight Princess, and Alice from Alice Madness Returns.
Okay.
And then, but as I drew her more, she started to kind of look like me, because people were like, oh, she looks like you. Is that you? I'm like, no, that's Judith. That's not me.
Right.
But I think it was where there were so many cross sections between things that I had experienced and things that the character had experienced that I was like, okay, she does start to resemble me. Now, I'm trying to stay away from the whole cringy self-insert going into, what is it? I'm not Starfire territory.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to stay away from like a complete dumpster fire. And I guess in my defense, I'm not using a pre-established universe and inserting myself into it. I'm kind of building it around similar experiences I've had, but through a more fantastical lens, you know.
I have a character named Joshua who's incredibly similar to me, but he's in my pro wrestling story. And I wrote that a long time ago with a friend of mine, not all of it, but and it's not in rhyme, but I'm converting it to rhyme. But the thing with him is he is, and this is the thing, people go, oh, well, you can't do, you know, copy this, that, or the other, XYZ. I'm like, you can if it's a supposal. The fact is, the reason C.S. Lewis can do a fawn in a British wood instead of like at winter time, instead of, you know, all the stuff that you normally see with fawns in Greece where they don't have a whole lot of snow, is because it's a supposal. This is what if, right?
Yes.
What
yes.
if? And that's not a simple parody. You know, this isn't something, you know, not to take anything away from Weird Al, but we're not doing Weird Al here. We're doing a supposal of, well, what if? This is what if my wrestling story is, what if I had a grew up with a childhood sweetheart. She died, and that spurred me to follow my dream to be a professional wrestler. And everything this character does is basically because of what happened with his girlfriend Anne, right? That's you know, like the inciting incident or whatever. But like I said, your inciting incident should be like something that sticks with their character and they can never shake. This is original sin. This is the idea that they have this one thing that they will always struggle with, right? This is everybody. People act like, yes, you can get better, you know, and I totally agree. In Christ, you can overcome all things. But there are some things in each of us, and I believe that they are specific sins and shortcomings that we will never get over because God designed us to never get over them, right? And it's not that you come to grips with that in this life. You don't. You fight it the entire time. That's the whole point, right? You're not you if you're not fighting that. Right? Luke Skywalker is not Luke Skywalker if he doesn't have an enemy, you know, the dark side to fight.
Yeah.
Right? He's not Luke Skywalker if there is no dark side, right? And so this is just where we're at in history. This isn't me saying that things will always be cyclical. I believe everything's coming to a culmination. But in the meantime, our battle is specific to us, and we need to be confessing it so that we can continually be beating it. Yeah. To continually be that's the other thing. People hear yin yang and they think good needs evil, evil needs good. No. Not what I'm saying here. I'm saying good will always triumph over evil. Not good ultimately triumphs over evil in our life and in our time, unless God comes back, right? Unless Jesus comes back. But our picture is thousands of little pictures of Christ.
Yes.
Our Christian picture is thousands of little pictures of Christ in the wilderness, and we need to understand that and be little Christs, Christians. That's literally what it means, little Christ. Yeah. You know, who seek to continue to prove the old trope that you hear in Westerns, the white hats always win. Right? It's to go back to the gaming thing you were talking about to round things out, right? You keep going because, quite frankly, you've got one life, but in a sense, you've got unlimited lives. You have unlimited failures. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Keep them.
Yep. So, well, Virginia, I want to send people to wherever they can to see your stuff if they can. And I want you to plug that now, and then I'll sign off, and we can keep talking for a moment if you want, or we can move on with the rest of our day. But where can people find your stuff if it's available?
I actually haven't posted a lot. It's kind of just in our little brood group. I mean, I
Mhm.
could send you some pieces, and I don't know if you could edit them in.
Oh, I plan on it.
Um,
Yeah, I want you to send me
yeah,
whatever you want
yeah.
me to edit in, and I'll just find slots for it.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely. What I'm planning to do is actually kind of release it as sort of a marketing campaign of showing my art and the progress. But it's actually going to be sort of a retroactive way of doing it. So a lot of it's already done, but I have pictures of the progress as it's
Yeah.
happening.
Hmm.
Because the way my work schedule is and my life is,
Yeah.
it's not coming out as much to build a big enough following
Right,
if
right,
I
right, right.
release it
Totally.
as it's being created. But I'm almost done with the inking for the first issue.
Beautiful.
So this is I'm at I think page 33. I got to do the 34th. Then I have to color it, so that's gonna take a while. But coloring generally happens very quickly for me, especially with the ink all done.
Hmm.
And then I gotta do the formatting and the dialogue and stuff. But once I'm there,
So
you're
if people
looking
are
to.
going to keep up with you, best place is on Facebook at In the Brood.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Gotcha.
yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll
Mhm.
link the Brood then, and y'all come in and join us and share your own stuff. We're trying to build this little Inkling style community. We want people who are artists, but also people who are not, poets and artists and whatever, who just enjoy all this geekdom and fun stuff and
Mhm.
memes and whatever else. We need those folks. Help keep us grounded. My wife's one of them in there. We have a few other folks who, like to dabble. They're not professionals, whatever. And they're not seeking to be professionals. That's a whole other category, seeking to be professionals, that I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
doesn't get talked about properly.
Mhm.
Because they're like, either you are or you aren't. Nah, art, it's a little different, man. You
Uh-huh.
you you
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
pay your dues, especially in a society that has basically no institutions for conservative artists. But
Yes. Yes. And that's very unfortunate.
yeah,
Uh,
but we're working
yeah.
on that. A lot of Christians working on all of that. So anyway,
Yeah.
well, everybody, be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. We'll see you next
Mhm.
time in the trenches on Poets at War.
Hi, I'm Joshua David Ling, and I'm resurrecting epic poetry for nerds like you. Come join me at joshuadavidling.com or just about anywhere on social media.
God of songs, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful heart shall praise thee.
If these words awoke within you a stirring and radiant fire, please remember even a bard is worthy of his wages and hire. Go to joshuadavidling.com/support to support me and my family.